Trending in China, where we dive into the latest buzz around the Chinese economy and beyond.
So people in Fujian love drinking tea, not just as a beverage, but also it has become part of our lifestyle.
I can vouch for the tea drinking culture. In 5 days, I had so much tea.
That's what makes Quanzhou so important in ancient times, because it's a starting point of the maritime Silk Road, and tea is something that people from the Europeans, they crave for in the past time. So the location and the product makes it very important.
A lot of different religious beliefs and local faith coexist in harmony there.
Yeah, in particular, there's a good harmony between the ecological side and the cultural side, and you're finding all of this in a thriving city. Xiamen University just blew me away, and we saw many beautiful things, many impressive things, but it's very hard to beat that campus. It's unbelievably beautiful.
Now people are not just satisfied with the natural offerings. They also wish to see what's the unique culture here. And for that part, I think Fujian also has a lot to offer.
Hello and welcome to Trending in China. I'm Yolanda Lu, an economic reporter based in Beijing. Today, we are going to talk about Chinese cities. When we talk about Chinese cities, the first that come to mind are Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. But there are so many amazing cities in China that don't get enough spotlight internationally. So starting from this episode, I will be inviting guests to share stories about the fascinating yet lesser known cities, their history, culture, and what's trending there. Today, we are going to talk about the cities in the coastal province of Fujian in southeast China. I'm glad to have Andre with me, who is from South Africa and now lives in Beijing. Andre just visited Fujian province a couple weeks ago, and we are so excited to hear his story. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you very much.
We are also glad to have Diego Yao with us, who is also a reporter based in Beijing, and he's a native of Fuzhou, capital of Fujian province. So he must have a lot of insights to share with us. Welcome, Yao.
Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here to say some nice things about my home province and my home city.
Okay, so Andre, you just came back from Fujian. My question for you, so if you can use 3 words to describe what impressed you the most in the province, what would that be?
Well, firstly, I can't use just 3 words. I tried to reduce Fujian to 3 words, but I had to go for 1 more. So please forgive me, give me the liberty of giving you 4. I think first up, green. You know, when you live in the Beijing winter, you are used to brown, right? Because it's cold and there's no leaves, 没有叶子 as we would say. So green, absolutely just beautiful. This bright green hits you. That was fantastic. Mountains. I saw many mountains full of green. The ocean. In South Africa, I grew up right next to the ocean, so seeing the ocean again was fantastic, and it was beautiful ocean. I mean, we took some drives next to the ocean. The views are fantastic, and also the culture, in particular, what is referred to, I guess, as the intangible cultural heritage. I saw examples of culture in Fujian, in particular in Quanzhou, which I found both enjoyable and in some cases amazing.
Yeah, ecology, culture, and a lot of great stuff in Fujian province. So Yao, you are from Fuzhou. What are your 3 words to describe the province?
Okay, so the first word, I would agree with Andre, is mountain. If you look at the map, and you will see that Fujian is a coastal province. And people tend to forget that it's also a mountainous province. It's no exaggeration to say that children in Fujian have never seen horizon on the plane. Because if you look in all directions in Fujian, you see either sea or mountains, no plane. Now we see this as a natural advantage because we have the highest forest coverage rate among Chinese provincial level regions, and we have clean air, many mountainous resorts, and also many specialties like delicious mushrooms. But in the past, it was a big problem because it was very difficult to build roads and railways in mountains. I remembered when I traveled to Beijing as a child many years ago, I spent 2 days and 2 nights on the train. And one entire day was spent within Fujian because the train ran so slowly in Fujian's mountainous areas. So you see, it could be a very big problem for not just travelers, but also business and other sectors. And now it's within 8 hours on a high-speed train. So you see China's infrastructure is very important for places like Fujian. And the second keyword I would use to describe Fujian is tea drinking. So people in Fujian love drinking tea, not just as a beverage, but also it has become part of our lifestyle. I would say almost every family and office in Fujian has a tea set and a stockpile of tea leaves. So when a guest visits, the host will serve them tea, and many office workers will start their day with a cup of tea. So it has become a sort of ritual. And the third word I would use to describe Fujian is religious. So Fujian is famous for its religious vibe and religious diversity. And in Fuzhou, because I come from Fuzhou, so I would use Fuzhou as an example. In Fuzhou, there is at least one temple or niche in every alley you visit. And in the downtown Jingtai Road, there is a very large mosque and a pink-colored Christian church. And nearby, there are also temples for the sea goddess Mazu and other local deities. So you can see a lot of different religious beliefs and local faith coexist in harmony there.
In fact, I want to jump in there. You reminded me of the sea goddess. I saw like a statue of the sea goddess in Quanzhou, and I was told like she looks after fishermen on the ocean. So you triggered a memory there I forgot about. Thank you for that.
Yeah, talking about the sea culture in Mazu, I think we have a lot more like to share about, because Mazu is not only confined to the area of Fujian, because I was in Hong Kong for almost 3 years, and there are so many temples called Tianhou temples, which is actually the Mazu temple. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is actually a culture that's shared around the world. Maybe Yao, you can introduce us more about the Mazu culture?
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
because you just mentioned Hong Kong. There is a subway station called Tianhou.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, named after the sea goddess. Yeah, when people nowadays talk about like local beliefs in Fujian, they think of Mazu. She comes from Fujian and has now become a symbol of Fujian's many local faith. She's not just popular in Fujian, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
She's also very popular in Taiwan and other coastal regions of China. The reason why she is very popular in the coastal areas, because in the past, she was seen as a protector of sailors, of fishermen, and of people living in coastal areas. Nowadays, she is seen more or less as a protector in general, and she has like millions of followers worldwide. There are many legends about Mazu. Mazu was a woman called Ling Mo, living in a fishing village in Fujian during the Song dynasty. So she had the ability to predict weather and storms. So she helped rescue many fishermen and sailors. And after she died in one rescue mission, locals built temples to remember her and to worship her as the protector of marine travelers. That was believed to be the origin of the Mazu belief. There are two other things about Mazu I like to mention. So the first, in many places, she was referred to as Tianhou, the queen of the heaven. So actually you will see a lot of Tianhou palaces instead of Mazu temples. The second is that many beliefs in Fujian are deeply woven into the local moral history. So like Mazu, many deities were once just ordinary people that were remembered by their neighbors for being extraordinarily kind-hearted or being very heroic, saving other people's lives. And I think that is one way of ancient Chinese people to pass down the memories, to pass down the stories of the good people that once lived with us.
Maybe to give young children something to aspire to, an example of how you contribute to your community. So you keep the person alive through the deity. That would be my take on that one. And as I say, I'm happy you mentioned, because it triggers for me a thought of Luoyang Bridge, which we went to in Quanzhou. And the name Luoyang is related to the city in Henan province in central China. And because we were told that back in the day, many people from Henan actually went to Fujian and settled there, and some started businesses, for example. But where that bridge was, the bridge was firstly and foremostly a cultural element of that time. But also the environment was very... it tied the culture with the ecology, because where that was located and where Mazu's statue was also in what we'd call a tidal flat, mangroves. And I noticed the mangroves seemed in very good condition. I saw many crabs, I saw many mud skippers, which are little ugly looking fish, but they're important, and many birds. So I thought to myself, well, this is a cultural bridge I'm walking across, but I can see around me the mangroves look in very good condition, lots of crabs, lots of birds, and lots of mud skippers. So as someone myself who has an interest in ecology, I thought, wow, this looks good. It looks like here in particular there's a good harmony between the ecological side and the cultural side, and you're finding all of this in a thriving city. I know one of China's huge aims, and it's a difficult one, but they're working hard to achieve it, is to develop a civilization that's in harmony with nature, not in opposition to nature. And that for me was a bit of a microcosm of having what looked like a very healthy ecology mixed with a strong cultural element within a modern thriving city.
That's very interesting. So, talking about the three cities we just mentioned, Quanzhou and Xiamen are both part of Minnan, which is the southern part of Fujian province, and Fuzhou is actually like in the northern part, like within the province. So, how is Minnan culture different from that, like in Fuzhou?
Yeah, it's funny that before the podcast, I talked with Yolanda, and I said the two regions are very different. And I cannot represent people from Minnan because I was born and raised in Fuzhou. But then when I think about it carefully, I realized that there are not many noticeable differences. And it occurred to me that there are more similarities than differences. Like both regions have a lot of hills, and they both boast religious diversity and very active local faith.
Yeah, like you said, they share a lot of things in common. Not only the things you mentioned, also maybe family value, they share the same thing. The sea culture, they also share, and also tea drinking that you just mentioned,
Yes.
right? It's more similarities than difference.
Yeah, all the three keywords and the four keywords you mentioned apply to both Fuzhou and Minnan.
Well, look, I just want to say I can vouch for the tea drinking culture. In 5 days, I had so much tea. Wherever we went to a place called Bama Tea, which is a bit of a bus ride outside of Quanzhou. And there we had like the li cha, the green tea, the hong cha, the red tea. There was a hua cha, there was then the flower tea, the herbal tea. So I can certainly vouch for that. And I enjoy tea. So for me, it was like a treat. Like you get with these different samples of tea. And the good thing is, you know, if you're drinking wine, it has an effect. If you have too many different wines, the next day you've got a headache. But yeah, it was like, you had like these different teas and it was fantastic. You sample the hong cha, the red tea, you sample the li cha, the hua cha. It was, yeah, the tea drinking, I can vouch for that. I mean, wherever we went, there was always tea handy. So yeah, that was, and I enjoyed that. It was fantastic.
Did you have problems sleeping that night?
Yeah, I ate tea too late at night. That is true. I can feel. But, you know, you don't want to say no. You know, people offer you tea and it's already poured. Now you're thinking, wow, it's like 3:45 in the afternoon. If I drink this hong cha or this li cha, the green tea or the red tea, I'm probably not going to sleep. But you don't want to say no, so you just drink it. And like 11 o'clock at night, you're lying in your bed. Okay, now maybe I shouldn't have had that tea. But, you know, it's part of people embracing you, so you don't want to reject what's being offered to you, you know. And if you have to lose a couple of hours sleep, I think it's a small sacrifice to make, you know.
Yeah, I think that's what makes Quanzhou so important in ancient times, because it's a starting point of the maritime Silk Road, and tea is something that people from the Europeans, they crave for in the past time. So the location and the product makes it very important in history. So Yao, you just mentioned about similarities. What kind of differences do you see, like in Mingnan and Fuzhou?
Yeah, I think the reason I immediately think of the two regions as being different is probably the language. So people from the Mingnan region speak the southern Fujian dialect, which is also spoken in Taiwan. And people from Fuzhou, like me, speak the Fuzhou dialect, which is categorized as an Eastern Fujian dialect. So there are many similarities in pronunciations, but in general, we can barely communicate with each other using our own dialects.
Yeah, talking about languages, Andre, you just mentioned about Henan, and I just found that the dialect of Mingnan culture is actually influenced by Henan, just in central China. Do you see any other influence from Henan during your trip?
Well, look, I don't know Henan province very well, to be honest. I've been to Jinzhou a few times, but literally just on the train, go through it. So it's hard for me to say. I just know that when we were there, we were told that there were very strong links between, as I say, with the bridge in Quanzhou was Luoyang Bridge, and of course we know Luoyang is a very famous city in Henan. And I do know that many people, they say back in the day, migrated from there. And they also spoke a lot about the Hakka culture, which I don't know very well. I know there's a football team called Meizhou Hakka. I like Chinese football. Many people say, why do you like Chinese football? They're not very good, but we leave that for another day. But I enjoy it. So I noticed that. But I think for me, one of the things I enjoyed the most was the trip we were on, I felt was really well planned by the organizers, because they gave us insight into that part of Fujian, Xiamen, Quanzhou as it was back in the day, you know, the ancient maritime Silk Road. We went to a maritime museum where you could see strong connections with other cultures. For example, I could see things that I would expect to see maybe in India, elements of Hinduism, Indian Buddhism, like you mentioned, the mosque, very cosmopolitan feel because of the ancient Silk Road days. But we also, apart from the Maritime Museum, went to the Xiamen FTZ, the Free Trade Zone, which gives you an idea of how the role Xiamen plays today. So there was a strong link between the past and the way it is now. That for me was a very, very good balance that we struck on this trip. I cannot even talk about Xiamen without mentioning Xiamen University. I said to the organizer, my only complaint was we didn't spend enough time at Xiamen University, because that campus, I mean, before I got there, people told me it's the most beautiful campus in China. And I thought, okay, people always say their place is most beautiful. But really, I mean, Xiamen University campus, it was beautiful. I mean, I saw some foreign students there. From the campus, you have this beautiful ocean view. They have this beautiful lake with black swans on it. Beautiful trees, you hear birds singing. They've kept some of the old architecture. We learnt about how the university was started. And I just thought to myself, what a place to study. My only concern would have been like, how do you study? It's so beautiful, so many things to do. The beach is there, you've got the lake. So I think that for me is certainly, if one is a student and you had the choice of studying anywhere, wow, I would put my hand up and say, Xiamen University, please. It was really beautiful. And I think that is one of the attractions that when one thinks about a place like maybe Xiamen, you think about the ecology, the beautiful beaches that's going to attract tourists. You think about the culture. You think about the economy for people wanting to work. There's many opportunities there in trade, but I think also in education, they've got a jewel in that university. I mean, I think I have children back in South Africa. When I showed them some of the photos and the videos from Xiamen University, they were like, wow, people study there? It's so beautiful. It looks like a tourist resort. I'm like, no, it's a university campus. So I had to mention that as I always speak of the 3 Ps, people, places, and products. And I think when we were in Fujian, we got to see a lot of all those things, the places, the cultural, the beautiful natural landscapes, the products we're into, for example, the Anta factory, the sportswear and shoes. So just so many things to see there. And I had to mention Xiamen University because that for me, it's a fantastic campus. And I suspect almost any student anywhere in the world, when they see that campus, they must be thinking, wow.
Are your children, they are going to apply for Xiamen University?
Well, my 2 older children, my daughter is studying medicine in South Africa, so she always says to me, Dad, I've barely got time to eat, because when you study to be a doctor, it's so busy. But she just said to me, wow, look at this campus. My son is working. My younger son, he's like, oh no, it looks nice. I like the swans. Young children, he's only 13. He's like, I like the swans. That was his summary of it. But if I was a young guy again, let's say I was in China or outside, if I took one look at that campus, I'd be like, wow, that must be a fantastic place. And even the sporting facilities were fantastic. There's massive sports fields, football fields, and you can be kicking a football with the ocean 5 minutes away. I mean, wow. That Xiamen University just blew me away. And we saw many beautiful things, many impressive things, but it's very hard to beat that campus. It's unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah, sure. Ecology, culture, education, and what about food? Do you like the food in Fujian?
Well, look, I was only there 5 days. I'm sure Yao will give us a much better idea of the real culinary depth of the province. But when I was there, we had a lot of seafood, and I enjoy seafood. Lots of different seafoods and very, very nice seafood. So if you ask me about the cuisine, seafood jumps to my mind. Crab, shrimp, fish. And I come from a coastal city in South Africa. Like I said, I grew up on the beach. I fished almost every day when I was young in the ocean. And I thought to myself, wow, this is like a real smorgasbord of fresh from the ocean food. So yeah, I could probably just sum it up as seafood. Yes. But Yao, I'm sure you have a lot more depth to your answer.
Since you've mentioned seafood, seafood in Fujian is usually cooked in a way that retains the most of its freshness, its original taste. So it's usually boiled or steamed with as little seasoning as possible.
It's very healthy.
Yes. And also, I have a question for you. Have you noticed a pungent smell when you are dining in a Fujian restaurant? Like some people would compare it to the smell of rotten seafood.
I didn't notice that. I do remember when I was in Shaoxing, the smell of the stinky tofu. That you could smell it a mile off, but I didn't notice anything as obvious as the Shaoxing stinky tofu. No. Why? Yeah. Is there a reason why you're asking that question?
Yes, it's a kind of condiment called Yu or fish sauce. Some people like me, like my family, also call it 虾油 or shrimp sauce.
Ah.
So this kind of sauce is created by fermenting seafood like small fish and shrimps. That's why it has a very unique taste of the sea. It gives food freshness and a salty taste.
Look, I didn't notice the smell, but I was very impressed with the seafood. I thought it did taste very fresh, and it did taste, if you go to Sichuan or Changsha, you can taste the spice, right? Where in this case the food did taste very, what's the word to use? It tasted very neutral, maybe is a good word to use, right? But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And when you say the fermented, I'm guessing that helps with digestion, right? It's almost like a yogurt, but it's a yogurt from the sea, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And also it's not just used in Fujian. You can also find it in Southeast Asian cuisines. Like I remember I had it, I tasted in a tom yum soup when I was traveling in Thailand.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but that taste, I have to say, it's controversial. Like for seafood lovers like me, we find it intoxicating, but some others hate it. So people have a love and hate attitude toward that sauce.
Okay. It sounds a very natural sauce, fermented. And I've always heard that, when something is fermented, it is supposed to be good for your digestion. Although, of course, some fermented products, if you have too much of it, you get drunk from it. That's what I'm assuming is not like that, because you cook it, so it shouldn't really affect you in that way. But I didn't notice any smell. Certainly not as obvious as when I was in Shaoxing and with the stinky tofu. That was like, you knew it was there.
Yeah, speaking of food, I just traveled to Fujian once, to Xiamen. I haven't been to Quanzhou or like Fuzhou. But what impressed me most was the oyster omelette. That's something that's cooked in restaurants around the world. It's also shared by Guangdong province, a lot of restaurants in Guangdong province. So I think what you just mentioned, the tom yum soup and a lot of food in Fujian, is not actually a cuisine that's belong only to Fujian province. It's something that's shared to other parts of the world, to Southeast Asia especially, through the trade road. When I was in Malaysia last year, so I tasted a lot of Fujian food actually in Malaysia. So that's something I like about the food culture in Fujian province. So let's talk about the economy. In Fujian. Andre, you visited the Xiamen Free Trade Zone, right? So what's your take on the economic trend in Fujian?
Well, it's very clearly a very busy part of the world. There seems to be a lot of things happening there. And, when you talk about economy, that's what you want. You want to be busy, right? When an economy is not busy, it's not a good sign. Busy economy means people have work. What I liked there was that there's both the trade, the import and export, which is obviously very important, but also I got a real sense of how some of the rural areas have been revitalized through an intelligent look at economy, where people who maybe, the impression I got, maybe 15, 20 years ago would have been reliant on one source of income. Let's say fishermen. The food from the ocean, you go fishing, you sell your fish. One or two places we went to, you could still get a sense of that traditional culture, people selling crab and fish, but you had coffee shops springing up. You have like the place we went to in Quanzhou for the Zanhua, where you could order a coffee, but you could also get yourself dressed up and your hair made up in this traditional gear. One of my co-workers was a man, got dressed in a dress, and he put flowers in his hair, and we were all offering to buy him drinks, and he was like, "I'm not a real woman, don't." and for me, it was very nice to see that apart from the big picture of major international trade, imports, exports, some of the rural areas have taken their strengths, their natural beauty, proximity to the ocean, their cultural heritage, and transformed that into small businesses that are largely from what I could tell, functioning in harmony with its traditional culture, in harmony with its natural environment. Unlike, if you're living in a forest and you're cutting down trees, those trees eventually, when they run out, your environment is destroyed and it takes years to rebuild the trees. So I got a sense of there's a macro economy, but there's also an intelligent microeconomy, and one that is allowing people to maintain a lot of their traditional beliefs or cultural practices, to live in harmony with the ocean and the surrounding forests and still make a living. It has the advantage, obviously, of something that can last a long time because you aren't depleting your natural resources, you aren't losing your cultural values, your cultural background, but you can also function in the modern world by getting tourists from big cities to come experience that way of life. So for me, the economy was a mix of the macro, the Xiamen, almost like the modern day port on a modern day Silk Road. Not quite the same, but it gave the same feel for it. But also internally, I got the sense of an intelligent economy, a more sustainable economy, and one that doesn't happen at the expense of culture, but more one where the old world and the modern world and the natural world and the commercial world are kind of closer to each other. It's not a parasitic relationship, but more a symbiotic one. And for me, that was very encouraging to see that there's both a macro economy, China's trade through that port with many other countries in the region and the world, but also an internal economy, often a micro one, where there's family businesses. I noticed quite a few younger people in some of these places, like the coffee shop we went to where you could have the Zanhua. The owner there, I think he looked quite young, and you could get a really nice coffee. You could speak quite a functional English. So I got a sense of an economy that is both macro and micro, and the micro one to me looked like a more sustainable approach than maybe would have been the case 30, 40 years ago, or even less.
Yeah, I think small business, like you mentioned, is playing, like in history, it played an important role. And right now, like when the Chinese economy is facing some kind of like difficulties, I think the small businesses are ever more important. And Fujian is actually famous for its private sector development. And people in China often refer to the model of private sector driven growth to Jinjiang model. Which is actually the birthplace of Anta. Yeah, that's the place that you went to.
Yes.
So, Yao, do you see a new trend in private economy development in Fujian?
Yeah, there used to be a lot of stereotypes when we talk about manufacturing and private economy in Fujian. We used to think about those factories producing shoes and garments and export them to Europe and America. That used to be the typical portrait of Fujian's manufacturing sector. Now I observe two changes. First, we have our own brands. So in the past, we could hardly think about any local brands that are famous internationally. Now we have Anta, right, which is internationally famous and can compete with Adidas and Nike. And the second is that it's not just about shoes and clothes. And one of the most famous companies in Fujian nowadays is CATL, the world's largest producer of EV batteries. And I once had the opportunity to visit their factories. There was a high level of automation, but I also saw a lot of workers, but they were more like engineers. So they were there to monitor the operation of the machines and to check the data, the indexes, to ensure that the factory is operating smoothly. So there is a shift in the growth model. So in the past, maybe the manufacturing sector was more powered by cheap labor, but now we see that the emergence of one that relies more on the so-called engineer dividend, China's expanding pool of talents, and the heavy investment in innovation, both by the government and also by the companies. And a lot of companies and brands are emerging thanks to this transformation.
And there's one more thing I noticed. A couple of the companies that we went to, private companies, they spoke about the importance of being responsible businessmen, responsible businesses, and that means, in essence, plowing money back into your local community. So if you have a factory, let's say in Quanzhou, then you make sure you plow money maybe into developing a health clinic for the local residents, building a hospital. And I think that's very important, in that you show people, especially your local community, that your success is not only going to be your success, but you're plowing back into the community. So that type of I guess one can call it responsible capitalism, where you allow your immediate community to also share. It's like a dividend in your success. And I noticed that in particular, a couple of the companies we went to, they put a heavy emphasis on plowing back into the local community, because in that way you are sharing the dividend, and the whole community, obviously to varying degrees, can benefit from that. And I took great encouragement from that, because sometimes a purely rampant capitalism, where it's all about how much money can we make and keep, can alienate your immediate environment, where if people can see that your success is also their success. And that's an emphasis I came across there, is that the companies were determined to also plow back tangibly into their local communities, like through health centers or hospitals. And also I noticed that quite a few of them had pictures up of money they were applying back into ecological projects, like whether it be the protection of the Yangtze River finless porpoise as an example, something like that, which I found as encouraging, in that they took their responsibility towards their communities, towards the environment very seriously too. And that's important, to have that type of model where it's not the money being hogged by a small amount of people, but people can tangibly see that the success of this company, this factory, we can feel it in other aspects of the local community. That, I think, is crucial to that mindset.
People in Fujian have a strong attachment to their homeland. So in the past, many Fujian locals would go overseas and work hard there as laborers, and after they earn money, they will wire back the money to their family and to set up business and or to improve the neighborhood, to improve the infrastructure. This tradition has passed on to today's new generation of entrepreneurs. So when they set up businesses, when they set up a company, there is still this kind of sentiment to benefit the neighborhood, and by doing so, they also improve their own image, right?
Yes.
And also to create a kind of like virtue that will benefit, I think, their entire family.
Now, I got a strong sense of that, and we were given a few examples of Fujian residents who had gone abroad and who had sent money back, money that helped not only their immediate family, but also helped the communities that stayed behind to develop things like Xiamen University, for example, to develop better medical care. And as you say, that tradition probably of going abroad and plowing money back has now engendered in the businessmen of today the sense of, we can't flourish at the expense of our community, we have to flourish with our community. And that is a huge shall we say, asset, I think.
Yeah, and I think more and more companies in China, they are actually acting like these Fujian companies. They are incorporating this ESG mindset, which is like environment, social responsibility, and governance, which is ever more important in the corporate governance system of companies. It not only generates profits for them, but it's also giving them sustainable returns in the long term. What are some fun facts or traditions that people outside Fujian they don't know about? Maybe Yao.
Okay, I would name one that is all the rage in recent years. So recently, I've noticed that a lot of tourists would come to Fujian to watch the Parade of the Gods. It's a tradition that has gone viral on social media. So for those who are not familiar with this, it is a lively event where villagers or local residents would hold up the statues or edifices of the local deities as they patrol the neighborhoods and hand out blessings. It has a kind of cyberpunk ambience. They are usually dressed in both traditional and modern ways, and you can see local residents broadcasting pop music to entertain them, and even bring the deities to cinemas to watch like what's the most trendy movies nowadays. I think it's quite spectacular to behold, and it's something I would say unique in Fujian and maybe some parts of Guangdong, and also it's also a popular tradition in Taiwan. For those who are interested, such events are usually held during the Spring Festival, during the Chinese New Year, but it's also held on the deity's birthday. Before you come to Fujian, you can check whether there are such traditions during your stay.
Fantastic. We went to see a puppet show, and it's a form of intangible cultural heritage, and I was amazed by the puppeteer. Now, he had this puppet, and there must have been about, I'm guessing, 40 strings attached to this puppet. And it was amazing the things he could do with the puppet. It could play a guitar. It could open a box and remove the guitar from the box. It was a monkey, the puppet. And it did so many different things. And I thought to myself, like, the puppeteer, he must have such an amazing mastery of his art, because some of us tried afterwards to make this puppet do things. But, you continuously tugging on the wrong string. And I thought to myself, wow, that is a fantastic tradition to have kept alive, because the puppet show not only tells a story, maybe reflects a traditional value or some cultural value or some moral value, but in order to do the puppet show well, the puppeteer must really practice and develop the ability to have these 45 strings, but to know exactly which string to pull at the right time. And I was blown away by that performance. Now, obviously, I don't understand some of the cultural background, but just the technical aspect of the show already was like, wow, how does this guy keep track of which string to pull? But I can imagine if you're someone from the local community who also understands maybe the cultural impact of the song that accompanies the dancing, or the story that this monkey puppet is maybe portraying. There's such a marriage almost between the meaning but the technical skill to bring that to life, which I think teaches people that to be a puppeteer is hard work. You're going to have to practice a long time, underlining that value of nothing comes easy, and then you have the ability, once you've mastered the technical aspect of the puppet, to bring to life cultural elements through the puppet show. Which maybe for young people reminds them there's no shortcuts in life. If you want to be able to do something meaningful, you first got to master, for lack of a better word, the less sexy element to it. When you go there and people are cheering and performing, that's fantastic. But to get there, many hours of practicing on the strings when nobody is looking. So I just thought that looking at what his absolute control and mastery of the puppet, for me just said that first, he had to go through all that training, all that practice, and only once he could handle the puppet's movements as if it was second nature, could he then effectively transition to be an entertainer, bringing life to the culture. And again, for me, that just underlined how that if you want to be successful at something or really contribute to your society, you first got to put in some seriously hard work behind the scenes, because the first time you go on stage and people are cheering for you, to get there, you first have to do many hours of hard work, and you may not succeed. So I just thought that for me was that whole technical stroke cultural element was a very useful cultural heritage for us to view, and for young people, because it underlines the fact that culture doesn't happen by accident. It requires work, requires effort, both technically and then also, later to be able to interpret through the motions, maybe what the meaning you're trying to get across. So I found that to be a very holistic experience, and just from a purely visual perspective, like sitting there and seeing all these strings and thinking, wow, how does this guy keep track of all these strings and which one to pull? So I could not let this conversation go by without mentioning that puppet show I saw in Quanzhou. It was the dexterity was amazing.
There are more tourists now drawn to the province and unique cultures. Well, for sure, Fujian is a very beautiful place, and it has a lot of mountainous resorts, very beautiful mountains and rivers. But now people are not just satisfied with the natural offerings. They also wish to see what's the unique culture here. And for that part, I think Fujian also has a lot to offer.
Well, I think I must be a very lazy person, because I could have just sat on the beach in Xiamen for 5 days fishing. I would have been happy, because it's so beautiful. The beach we drove past, you can sit on the beach. It's this beautiful ocean. You can see a bunch of islands. You see these big ships coming past. You get these beautiful greenery behind you. I said to myself, I could just sit on that beach for the next 5 days, sip some Fujian tea, maybe catch a fish or two. I'd be happy. But the fact that there is so much variety, I think that's also part of it. Is if you're a person who just wants to enjoy nature, you could just go there, as we say in South Africa, park yourself on the beach. Or if you're someone who likes to see many things, there's also many options. And as I say, from my perspective, there's the natural beauty that blew me away, the green, the mountains, the ocean. There's the cultural elements. If you just want to get away from it, you could maybe go on a spiritual retreat, go to one of the temples and just sit there in quiet, maybe 5 days of silence. Because silence can also flow your juices, your creative juices. I just found that there were so many things, and I should not also neglect to mention the people. I was very impressed, not just the people who hosted us, because obviously if someone hosts you, it's their job to make sure you're comfortable. But once or twice we just broke away from the crowd at night and just went walking through the city, and people were very friendly, and we felt very, very safe. Young children were still running on the street at 9 o'clock at night. The southern climate clearly helps with that. It doesn't get cold so quickly. So I just felt very comfortable, and like you say, there's a large variety of things to do. A person like me, I could have sat on the beach for 5 days and be happy, but for me it was my first time in Fujian. I'd lived in the south of China before. I'd lived in Hubei, I'd lived in Jiangsu, and I'd lived in Zhejiang, so I knew the south fairly well. But fantastic. I mean, when you ask me about places in China, I'd say at the moment, if I could choose 2 places I'd like to go to long term, would be Kunming, where I've been before, in the southwest, which I think is beautiful. But Xiamen really, and Quanzhou, I really felt like, wow. In fact, one of my co-workers said, I think I should just come and retire here. I thought, it's a nice place for that.
Yeah, Fujian has that kind of vibe, retirement vibe. The lifestyle, the pace of life is much slower.
I could feel it.
And now it becomes a attractive point, right? Many people go there to just wind down, to savor that kind of slow life.
Yeah, it's rare for a single city to have this combination of leader, like you just mentioned, and also courage to go overseas, right? It's a combination of both. So you can rest in the city. You can also go overseas to to make money, right, and send it back to your family. So I think that says much about Quanzhou and also about Fujian. So that brings us to the next question. If you guys would give suggestions to the first-time travelers to Fujian province, what would that be?
I think it depends. It depends on the person. If you're someone who likes variety, okay, then it'd be worth saying to yourself before the trip. Let's say you like a structured trip. Say to yourself, like, what do I want to see? And then you could plan your trip. Make sure you go to the temple you want to go to the beach you want to go to. And if you're someone who just wants to arrive and let's see how it goes, you can be happy sitting on the beach, then you can do that. So it depends on the person. I would say that having been there once now, if I had to go there, I would try to find a blend between the natural beauty and the cultural elements. In other words, it's if I go for a 10-day trip, maybe in my case, set aside 7 days for the beach and maybe some mountain scenic resort, and set aside maybe 3 days, in my case now, for going maybe to a puppet show or to some type of musical performance or to go to a temple. So I think you need to prioritize what it is you really want to see. Because in that way you can make sure that you plan your trip. And I would also say the time of year can be important. If you're someone who wants to swim in the ocean, then maybe summer is better than winter. So yeah, it depends on the individual. But I just felt when I was there, as Yao said, I did feel like it was like a complete unwind. I felt like I felt in Kunming, like it was just, okay, if nothing gets done in the next hour, it's not the end of the world. We know, like in Beijing, people run on the subway, and it's a happening place. Where there, I just felt it was a place of leisure. So my advice would be, if you go as a family, you've got to obviously incorporate things the kids are going to like. So a bit of pre-planning is maybe a good idea, and bearing in mind the time of the year. If it's going to be wet season and you want to be on the beach, then maybe wet season is more appropriate if you want to see cultural things, because if it's raining you can still do things indoors, for example. So I would say it depends on your budget. All these things are important, but I didn't feel like I would be bored there. In fact, I would feel that even a 10-day trip probably just scratching the surface, and that's just speaking of Xiamen and Quanzhou, never mind Fuzhou and other parts of the province. So yeah, for me it's a place where there's so much on offer. A lot depends on the individual, what it is you value the most.
It's the year of the snake. So my advice is that just remember that Fujian has a lot of snakes in the wild. Yeah, so if you visit the mountains, there are chances that you may spot some. And my advice is that be calm and carry on. Well, because most of the times I've seen quite a lot of snakes when I was a child, when visiting mountainous areas. But for most of the time, it's okay.
Yes.
They won't get too close to you, as long as you don't try to make a noise or try to disturb their lives. But it's good to remember the fact that there are snakes, and because of the improving ecology, and because nowadays villagers no longer hunt them for food, there are more snakes.
Funny, that reminds me of two things. I come from South Africa and the East Coast, and we have many snakes, some deadly snakes. So, but I remember in Beijing, by Wangshan, in the northwest, you go up the mountain, there's many signs that say beware of the snakes. I've never seen a single snake in Wangshan. I'm like, there's more snake signs than snakes, but maybe they haven't. I just didn't see it, because local knowledge helps. You see, beware of the snakes. Like in South Africa, if you go swimming in the ocean, there's some beaches where I'd say beware of the sharks, because some beaches are protected, some are not, and some are notorious for shark attacks. So there. You see, there Yao, he gives good practical local knowledge. Beware of the snakes.
Yeah, that's a very important point, actually.
That is. I think it is. Well done.
Yeah. So Anything to add? Maybe like what can you talk about more things that impressed you most before we go to the quiz time?
Well, I think what I liked was how you can have a part of the city that really feels like it's 1,000 years ago in the midst of skyscrapers. And that part of the city that feels like it's 1,000 years ago is not only well preserved, but it has businesses in it, like coffee shops and things. So it's a cultural relic, but it's not dead. It's still vibrant. It's a part of the city. And I really enjoyed the fact that you could almost, in the space of 10 steps, go from 2025 to what felt like maybe 1225. But it's not just an empty space that sits there. There's actually people inside. That for me was a very nice feeling that you could be in the modern world, but within a few steps you in a more ancient world. And I first came across that when I was in Shaoxing, my first home city in China. I was like, wow. Like when I'm in my apartment, I feel like I'm in, it was 2019, 2018. But if I walk half an hour down the street, I feel like I'm 1,000 years ago. And I think that for me was something I really enjoyed, was the fact that not only was there access to this trip back in time, but it was something that was still vibrant, still alive. People were in there selling coffee or whatever the case may be. And I felt that was very encouraging. I liked the fact that there's so many birds and trees and natural environments. Also, again, within the skyscrapers, it's 15 minutes, you're on a beautiful beach. I saw the flourishing mangroves. I had this German colleague who just was capturing these fantastic birds with these massive telephoto camera lens. So, I just felt that there was a lot on offer, and that it was all kind of tied in together. There wasn't like, the relics were almost alive, not stuck in some museum. You could almost live the life in the sense you could walk through those surroundings, both the natural and the cultural, and it was still alive.
Now the quiz time. I have prepared the 3 questions for you. So first one, it's simple. Which city in Fujian has the highest GDP last year? Andre first.
Fuzhou.
Well, since I'm from Fuzhou, so I probably should name another city, maybe Quanzhou, because of its vibrant manufacturing sector.
Okay, Andre, you got this one.
But I think Yao probably would have, but he thought if I say that I sound arrogant, so maybe.
Well, actually, Quanzhou, I think in the past, Quanzhou was the number 1, but last year, Fuzhou's GDP was over 1.4 trillion yuan, and for Quanzhou's GDP is 1.3 trillion yuan, so it's
still
game.
Pretty high.
Yeah, it's still pretty high. And for Xiamen ranked the 3rd, maybe because the area of Xiamen is not as large as Quanzhou and Fuzhou. Okay, so the second question is actually easier. Which part of Fujian province has the highest piano density in China?
Piano?
Yeah,
density.
I know the answer.
Yao can go first.
No, since I know the answer, so I will let you make the first guess.
The highest piano density, in Fuzhou, piano.
Not in Fuzhou, like
in Fujian. Fujian, yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm going to go with Fuzhou again.
Maybe you can tell him the answer.
Okay, I will announce the answer. It's in Xiamen. Because Xiamen, in Xiamen there is an island called Gulangyu, and there is a piano museum.
Oh wow! Okay.
And when you travel, when you just walk down the streets on the island, you can very often hear the sounds of piano.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that reminds me, when I used to, sorry, just as a quick sidebar, I used to love that when I lived in Dongbei in the northeast of China. You go into the park and the old people are playing musical instruments. That was fantastic, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, like you just mentioned. So in Gulangyu, every 50 residents, they have one piano.
Oh, wow.
So that's a very, very high piano density. Yeah.
So the score is 1-1, right?
Yeah, 1-1. Okay. The last one is really hard actually. Yeah, you can take a guess. How many Mazu temples are there globally? Take a guess.
Who's going to go first?
You can go first.
75,300.
Wow.
That's really good.
That is a complete guess.
Yeah.
Well, my guess would be like 10,000.
Yeah, your answer is closer. 10,000 to 20,000 globally in 50 countries and regions around the world.
Oh, wow. So the bad news is I've lost. But the good news is I spent a fantastic week in Fujian.
Yeah, the good news for me is that I learned so much from you guys today. And for me, I haven't been to Quanzhou or Fuzhou, but the first question that I asked you, the 3 words to describe Fujian province, I learned from your thoughts, and I can summarize using my own 3 words. Maybe it is diversity, and also inclusiveness, and also responsibility, you just
Those are good ones, actually. Yes, they're the deeper ones, right?
Yeah, that's summarize the culture and the history of Fujian province. When I'm doing research for the show, I saw a social media post about the Quanzhou Maritime Museum that I just went to. There is a closing reflection that reads, "You should strive for knowledge, even as far as China." It's a famous Arabic proverb that highlights the timeless call for intellectual pursuit beyond cultural boundaries. So I guess that perfectly says about the diversity, openness, and integration of Quanzhou and the maritime culture that it embodies. So with that, I would like to conclude our first episode of this China travel series, and we hope you enjoy the show. If you like our podcast, you can subscribe it for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Little Universe, 小宇宙. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.